My mother's voice came through my phone at 2 a.m. 3 years after I buried her. I'm Sadie Monroe. I'm 28 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse in a small hospital just outside Columbus, Ohio. I live alone now in the same house where I grew up, the same walls that watched me become an adult, and the same living room where my mother took her final breath in a hospital bed we set up near the window. I'm not someone who believes in ghosts or signs or things that can't be explained. I don't watch horror movies, I don't read horoscopes, and I don't believe the dead linger around to send messages. I lock my doors every night and keep a baseball bat next to my bed, not because I'm paranoid, but because I believe in being prepared. I've always been that way. Careful, practical, grounded. So when I tell you what happened that night, I need you to understand something clearly. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't having a mental breakdown or slipping into grief-induced hallucinations. I was wide awake, standing in my hallway at exactly 2 a.m., staring at my phone as my dead mother's name lit up the screen. And when I finally gathered the courage to look through the peephole, she was standing there on my porch. Same face, same posture, same gray cardigan she was buried in. The same gentle eyes that used to peek into my room when I had nightmares as a child. Then she said something that made my blood turn cold, something so specific and so personal that no one else on this earth could have known it. I know how unbelievable that sounds. I know you're already thinking of explanations, a scam call, a cruel prank, my grief resurfacing in some ugly, twisted way. I thought all of those things too. I desperately wanted one of them to be true. But none of those explanations could account for what she said next. Before I tell you the rest, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. I want to know who's here with me tonight. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. The night this happened was a Thursday in late February. I remember because I had just finished a double shift at the hospital, 16 hours straight. My feet hurt so badly I could barely make it to my car. We were short-staffed, worse than usual. 2 nurses had called in sick, and we had a little boy in the ICU who wasn't doing well. I spent most of my shift sitting beside him, holding his small hand, telling him stories about superheroes while his parents took turns crying in the hallway. By the time I clocked out, it was nearly midnight. The drive home took about 20 minutes, and I barely remember it. I was running on caffeine and adrenaline, my mind completely focused on one thing: sleep. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. I realized the porch light I'd left on that morning had burned out. I made a mental note to replace it and then immediately forgot. I was too exhausted to care. I just wanted to get inside. I didn't turn on any lights when I walked in. I knew that house better than I knew my own reflection. I could walk from the front door to my bedroom with my eyes closed. I'd been doing it since I was 5. Sometimes the house still smelled like her. My mother, Renata Monroe, used lavender lotion every day. Even 3 years after she died, I could still catch faint traces of it in certain rooms. The kitchen, the bathroom, her bedroom. I still hadn't cleaned it out. I kept telling myself I would someday, but someday never came. My mom raised me alone. My father, Dean, left when I was 12. One day he was there, the next he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. He packed a bag while I was at school and disappeared. When my mom came home and found half the closet empty, she sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the space where his clothes used to be. I watched her from the doorway, too afraid to speak. She never cried in front of me. She just got up the next morning, made scrambled eggs and toast, and when I asked where Dad was, she looked at me calmly and said, "It's just us now, sweetheart, and that's okay. We're going to be just fine." And we were. She worked as a seamstress, doing alterations downtown. The work wasn't glamorous and it didn't pay much, but she was good at it. Her hands were always busy. Even when she watched TV, she'd be stitching something. We had our routines: pancakes on Sundays, old movies on Fridays. She loved Audrey Hepburn and could recite half the dialogue from memory. And every night before bed, she'd say the same thing: "I love you to the spoon and back." It started as a mistake when I was 7, but it became ours. She wrote it in every card, said it at the end of every call. When I graduated nursing school, she gave me a silver spoon in a small box, and I cried harder than I ever had. The last time she said it was 3 years ago, 6 hours before she died. She was weak. The cancer had spread everywhere. We'd placed the hospital bed by the window so she could watch the bird feeder. She loved the cardinals. I was holding her hand when she looked at me and whispered, "To the spoon and back, baby." Then she closed her eyes. I thought I'd never hear those words again. I was wrong. I went to bed around 12:30 that night. I didn't eat. I didn't turn on the TV. I just collapsed. I didn't dream. When I'm that tired, there's nothing but darkness. Then, at 2:07 a.m., my phone rang. I grabbed it without opening my eyes. When I looked at the screen, my heart stopped. The contact simply said, "Mom." Not old number, not voicemail, just "Mom." I stared at it while it rang, vibrating in my hand. I told myself it was a glitch. Someone else had the number now. It went to voicemail. Then it rang again. I answered. I didn't speak. I listened. "Sadie, sweetie, it's Mom." My body went cold. It was her voice, exactly her voice. Then she said, "Baby, I'm outside. It's cold. Can you let me in?" I hung up. I dropped the phone. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. Then I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the front door, exactly the way she always knocked. I got out of bed. I don't know why. Every instinct told me not to, but something pulled me forward. Some combination of fear and desperate, irrational hope that I couldn't control. The hallway was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked toward the front door like I was moving through water. Each step heavy and slow. The brass peephole glinted in the faint light coming through the window. My mother had installed it herself when I was 15 after a stranger knocked on our door asking for money and scared us both half to death. I pressed my eye to the peephole and looked outside. She was standing on the porch, bathed in the yellow glow of the streetlight at the end of the driveway. Gray cardigan, silver hair pinned back the way she always wore it, hands clasped in front of her, patient and still. My mother, 3 years dead, standing on my porch at 2 a.m., waiting for me to let her in. I backed away from the door so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. My shoulder hit the wall behind me, and I stood there, pressed against it like the door might burst open at any second. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps, and I could feel tears building behind my eyes. Even though I wasn't sure why I wanted to cry, my mind was racing through every possible explanation. A twin sister my mother never told me about? Some kind of elaborate prank orchestrated by someone who hated me? A mental breakdown brought on by stress and exhaustion, and the fact that the anniversary of her death was only 4 days away. None of these explanations made sense, but neither did anything else that was happening. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands and pulled up my contacts. I scrolled until I found Aunt Delia, my mother's younger sister. She lived about 20 minutes away in a small apartment complex near the highway. She and my mom had been close, talking on the phone almost every day until the cancer made conversation too exhausting. After my mom died, Delia checked on me constantly, bringing casseroles I didn't eat and offering company I didn't want. I'd pushed her away more than I should have, but she never stopped trying. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Sadie, what's wrong? It's the middle of the night." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out as a whisper. "Someone's at my door. They look like Mom." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Delia shifting, probably sitting up in bed. "What do you mean they look like your mom? Sadie, you're scaring me." I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't have words for what I'd just seen through that peephole. "I don't know what's happening. I got a phone call from her number. Her voice was on the line. And now someone who looks exactly like her is standing on my porch." Delia's voice turned sharp and alert, all traces of sleep gone. "Listen to me carefully. Do not open that door. Do you understand? Stay away from the door. I'm calling the police and then I'm coming over. Don't move until I get there." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the hallway clutching my phone, trying to convince myself that help was on the way and everything would be fine. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't just stand there and wait. The person on the porch knew things. She knew my mother's phone number. She knew how my mother knocked. She sounded exactly like my mother. I needed to understand how any of this was possible. And then her voice came through the door, muffled but clear. "Sadie, I know you're scared. I know none of this makes sense, but I need you to trust me. Ask me something. Ask me something only I would know." I pressed my back harder against the wall. My heart was beating so fast it actually hurt. I thought about all the things I could ask: my mother's birthday, her maiden name, the hospital where she spent her final days. But anyone could find that information with a quick internet search. If this was some kind of scam, some cruel trick designed to break me, they would have done their research. I needed something else, something private, something I had never told another living soul. I moved closer to the door, just close enough that my voice would carry through the wood. "What did you say to me the night before my 8th grade graduation when I was crying in the bathroom?" Silence. For a long moment there was nothing but silence, and I thought maybe I had caught her. Maybe this imposter had finally reached the limit of whatever game she was playing. Then she spoke. "I told you that your father leaving wasn't your fault. You asked me once if it was because you weren't a boy. You thought maybe he wanted a son instead of a daughter. You never said it again, but I never forgot. I told you that you were the only thing I ever did right." My legs gave out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the cold plaster, tears streaming down my face. I had never written those words down. I had never spoken them to a therapist or a friend or anyone. That memory lived only in my head, locked away in a place I never visited because it hurt too much. Whoever was standing on my porch had just unlocked it. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor. It could have been 30 seconds or 5 minutes. Time had stopped making sense. All I could hear was my own breathing and the blood rushing in my ears. The words she had spoken kept echoing in my head, playing on a loop I couldn't stop. She knew the one thing nobody else in the world could possibly know. I got to my feet slowly, using the wall for support. My legs felt weak and unsteady, like I had just run a marathon. I walked to the door and stood in front of it, staring at the locks my mother had installed years ago, 2 deadbolts and a chain. She always said you could never be too careful. I wondered what she would think if she could see me now, standing here in the middle of the night, about to open the door for someone who might be her ghost. My hands moved before my brain could talk me out of it. I turned the first deadbolt, then the second. I slid the chain out of its track and let it hang loose against the frame. And then I turned the handle and pulled the door open. She was standing right there, just a few feet from me. The porch light from the neighbor's house cast a soft glow across her face, and I could see every detail: the fine lines around her eyes, the small scar on her chin from a cooking accident when I was 10, the way her gray hair curled slightly at the ends because she never could get it to lie flat. She looked exactly like my mother. Exactly. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at this impossible woman who wore my mother's face like it belonged to her. The cold February air rushed past her and into the house, but I barely felt it. "You're not real," I finally managed to whisper. "You can't be real. I watched her die. I held her hand while she took her last breath. I picked out the dress she was buried in." The woman's eyes filled with tears, and something about that broke me even more. Ghosts weren't supposed to cry. Hallucinations weren't supposed to look so heartbroken. "I'm real," she said. "I'm just not who you think I am. Can I come inside? Please? I'll explain everything." I stepped back without saying anything, and she walked past me into the house. She moved carefully, looking around at the walls and the furniture, like she was seeing it all for the first time. Her fingers brushed against the back of the couch, and she paused in front of the mantel where I kept my mother's photograph. "She was beautiful," she said quietly. "I always wondered what she looked like." I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. "Who are you?" She turned to face me, and I could see the resemblance even more clearly now. Same height, same build, same way of holding her hands clasped and thin for body. But there were differences too, tiny things I hadn't noticed through the peephole. Her eyebrows were slightly thinner. Her posture was a little straighter. She carried herself like someone who had lived a different life. "My name is Marina," she said. "Marlena Davis, and I'm your mother's twin sister." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I shook my head, refusing to accept what she was saying. "That's impossible. My mother didn't have a twin. She didn't have any siblings except Aunt Delia." "She didn't know about me," Marina said. "Neither of us knew. We were separated at birth. Different adoptions, different families, different states. I grew up in Vermont with parents who loved me, and I never knew I had a sister until 6 months ago." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly and held it out to me. It was a DNA test result from one of those ancestry websites. I'd seen commercials for them 100 times. The paper showed a match, a 99.98% probability of a full sibling relationship with someone named Renata Monroe. "I found her too late," Marina continued, her voice breaking. "By the time I tracked her down, she was already gone. I missed her by 3 years. 3 years, Sadie. I had a sister my whole life, and I never got to meet her." I took the paper from her hands and stared at it. The numbers blurred as tears filled my eyes. This woman wasn't a ghost. She wasn't a hallucination or a scam artist or some cruel trick. She was my mother's other half, the piece of her that had been missing all along. "The phone number," I said. "How did you get her phone number?" Marina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I contacted the phone company. I told them I was settling her estate and needed the number reactivated for records purposes. They believed me. I just wanted something that connected me to her. I never meant to scare you. I've been watching you for weeks, trying to find the courage to introduce myself. Tonight, I saw your lights go off and I panicked. I called before I could stop myself. I'm so sorry." I looked at her face again, searching for my mother in her features. She was there. She was everywhere. The sound of sirens broke the silence between us. Red and blue lights flashed through the front window, painting the walls in alternating colors. A few seconds later, there was a loud knock at the door, and I heard Aunt Delia's voice calling my name. I opened the door to find her standing there with 2 police officers behind her, her face pale and terrified. "Sadie, are you okay? What's going on? Who's in there with you?" I stepped aside so she could see Marina standing in the living room. Delia froze in the doorway, her mouth falling open. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself, and I watched the color drain from her face completely. She looked like she had just seen a ghost, which I suppose she thought she had. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Renata?" "No," I said quietly. "Her name is Marina. She's Mom's twin sister." What followed was the longest night of my life. The police officers took statements from all of us while Delia sat on the couch in stunned silence. Marina explained everything again, showing the DNA results and the photographs she carried in her wallet. It was an old picture, faded and worn at the edges. 2 baby girls in matching yellow onesies lying side by side in a hospital bassinet. On the back, someone had written in careful handwriting that I recognized immediately as my grandmother's. Renata and Marina, together, always. Delia couldn't stop crying. She kept saying she had no idea, that their mother had never mentioned anything about a twin, that she couldn't believe this secret had been buried for so long. I sat beside her and held her hand while she processed the shock. I understood exactly how she felt, because I was feeling it too. The officers left around 4 in the morning after determining that no crime had been committed, just a family reunion that had gone about it in the strangest possible way. Marina apologized again for scaring me, and this time I believed her. I could see the regret in her eyes, the desperate loneliness of someone who had spent her whole life feeling incomplete without knowing why. In the days that followed, Marina and I began the slow and careful work of getting to know each other. She told me about her life in Vermont, where she had worked as an elementary school teacher for 30 years before retiring. She had been married once to a man named Richard, who died of a heart attack 8 years ago. They never had children, something she said she always regretted. She showed me pictures of her house, her garden, her 2 cats named Pepper and Sage. She liked crossword puzzles and old movies and lavender tea, which made me smile because my mother had loved all of those things too. I told her about my mom. I told her about the Sunday pancakes and the Friday night movies and the silver spoon she gave me at my graduation. I told her about the cancer and the hospital bed in the living room and the way my mother looked at the cardinals outside the window like they were old friends. Marina listened to every word with tears rolling down her cheeks. She was grieving someone she had never met, mourning a lifetime of memories she would never get to make. 4 days after that strange night, the 3rd anniversary of my mother's death arrived. Marina and I drove to the cemetery together in the early morning light. The grass was still wet with dew and the air smelled like rain. We stood in front of my mother's headstone side by side, neither of us speaking for a long time. Finally, I broke the silence. "Mom, this is your sister. She found her way back to us." Marina placed a small bouquet of lavender on the grave. Her hands were trembling. "I wish I could have known you," she said softly, "but I'm going to take care of your daughter, I promise." We stayed there for almost an hour, talking to my mother like she could hear us. Maybe she could. I don't know what I believe about those things anymore. When we got back to my car, Marina hugged me tight. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, like holding on to a piece of my mother I thought I had lost forever. Before she let go, I whispered in her ear, "To the spoon and back." She pulled away and looked at me with confusion in her eyes. I smiled through my tears. "I'll explain. We have time now." Grief had convinced me that I would never hear my mother's voice again. I thought that part of my life was closed forever, sealed away in memories that would only fade with time. But I was wrong. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It just finds new ways to reach you. Sometimes it shows up on your porch at 2 in the morning, wearing your mother's face and carrying secrets that were buried for decades. Marina visits me every month now. She's teaching me how to garden, and I'm teaching her how to make my mother's blueberry pancakes. We're building something new out of something that was lost, and I think my mom would be proud of both of us. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment telling me about a time when someone unexpected came into your life and changed everything. I read every single comment and I love hearing your stories. Some people come into our lives exactly when we need them most. We just have to be brave enough to open the door.